So Scottish First Minister Humza Yousaf tendered his resignation this week. I mean, he's still staying on until a replacement can be found. I mean, Tom, has the bungling finally caught up with him? Is this the bigger problem with the SNP? What have you made of it?
It was like the bungle to end all bungles, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because he basically accidentally imploded his own government, which is amazing. Like, he obviously has this reputation for gaffes, for getting things wrong, falling off knee scooters, all of that we went over on the show last week. But for the fact that he terminates this coalition agreement with the Greens, and then is shocked to find out that they're so upset about it, they might not support his minority government inside Holyrood, was really quite funny. I thought it was interesting the note on which he went out on, though, in his speech that he gave, where aside from it was relatively short, and aside from the usual thank yous to party and family and so on, he made a point of saying that while Scotland's a great country, there's still too much hatred, that politicians have to resist the allure of populism. And I thought it was another kind of fitting epitaph insofar as not just Yousaf, but the whole SNP project has been so bound up with defining themselves often against the Scottish people, wanting to kind of reform the Scottish people, remake them. And that seems to have been, to the extent that it's a legacy, that's the only one that they can point to. It's just, look, we need independence from Westminster so that we can set to work with reprogramming you awful lot. Yeah. And I thought that speech was another reminder of that in some way.
Independence from the Scottish people.
Yeah, well, it reminded me a little bit, that closing speech, of, Pedro Sanchez in Spain almost deciding, or wasn't he going to decide, but he eventually decided not to quit under this corruption scandal that was growing around his wife. And instead of addressing the corruption scandal, it was all, I'm under so much negative media pressure from the far right, the nasty people. And it was the same. Instead of grappling with the issue, you kind of paint the picture of the evil people who are full of hate, as you put it. But the whole debacle was really illustrative of the general state of Scottish politics. A few people have made this point, that it's like he was like kind of politically raised in an era in which politics doesn't really mean anything in Scotland, and it's kind of virtue signals or kind of social policies that you talked about last week. But the actual job of doing politics, of figuring out where you win the votes, how you get the coalitions together, kind of how you assemble that, kind of the mechanics of government, seemed like completely alien to him. And so the idea that you might terminate an agreement and then that might have political repercussions for you, that was just like completely alien. Like, it never crossed his mind that this might kind of implode his whole premiership.
And there was a sort of brief, potentially delicious moment, nothing really came of it, where there was the possibility of Ash Regan, who former SNP leadership candidate, in fact, who went off to join Alba, possibly casting the deciding vote in the future.
And see about the gangs running around with machetes, because that's the stories I am hearing.
Johnson, I think the Tory candidate should stop watching The Wire.
And he obviously just didn't see any of that coming.
Yeah, well, the outcome of it as well has really illustrated your point about them kind of running scared of the Scottish people. So today you've had this kind of weird spectacle of like it all getting tied up very quickly in terms of the leadership race, but the overriding concern of everybody involved is there can't be an election. Yeah, absolutely. At no cost must this issue be put to the people. Instead, we're going to handle it in-house. We'll find some kind of continuity candidate, as it seems like it's some old hand who can steady the ship. But at any cost, do not ask the people what they think.
And as awful as the SNP are, basically every political party in Scotland, I guess bar the Tories, has their fingers on every SNP screw up. I mean, the Greens were absolutely insane. Actually campaigning against economic growth while in government, for instance. But, Labour supported the Hate Crime Act, the Gender Recognition Act, all of the things that have, unravelled this project so spectacularly.
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting, though, is that I don't expect any great public reverse ferrets apologies for supporting some of the really dangerous and authoritarian policies that you've listed there. But at the same time, it is interesting how chastened they've been by this particular experience, and how actually you keep seeing this across the Anglosphere, basically, where you've had one leader after another who's really embraced the sort of mantle of like woke authoritarianism. They wouldn't see it that way. They see it as bringing their particular nation, into the 21st century, kicking and screaming. But, Leo Varadkar stepped down, just over, a month ago. Before that, of course, there was Nicola Sturgeon stepping down, someone who is, very much the kind of embodiment in many respects of a lot of the dreadful politics that we're talking about here. Jacinda Ardern, last year. Justin Trudeau's having a terrible time of it at the moment. I mean, he's like losing in the polls by double digits to the Conservatives there in Canada. So all of these political parties who have engaged in precisely this politics that we're talking about, defining yourself against your own people, introducing sweeping hate crime and hate speech legislation, in basically imposing policies on them, whether it's on migration or transgenderism or whatever, in the face of clear public opposition to it. The environmental issue, you take all of these things together, they've all been pursuing a very similar agenda, and across the piece really, it's colliding both with reality and with public opinion. And in each of these cases, people haven't been defeated in an election, but they've stepped down because of the fact they realised their authority was shredded amongst the public. That had finally caught up with them. So I think, even though it doesn't always seem like it, there's been some, for those of us who are interested in a more liberal, democratic politics, it's actually not been a bad year or so as far as the punishment beatings that have been inflicted on some of these people.